And now, with a heavy heart, the film festival has come to an end. Yeah, I know, but hey, there'll be another one next year. Provided monkeypox doesn't put us into another lockdown. Anyway, let's talk about the next set of movies I've seen. This is part 2 of my film festival review series. First up we have Perlimps. Okay, this was a movie that I almost didn't like. And I'll get to what saved it for me a little later. While I was watching it, there were two things going through my mind. How boring the story was, and how delightfully childish the logic was. It's about two forest animals who are both from opposing kingdoms, and they find out that they're both on the same mission to infiltrate the world of giants, aka the world of humans. Yeah, the plot is a bit cliche, but it's also kind of confusing at the same time. I know this movie is meant to be for kids, but my adult brain just couldn't help but pick apart all of the logic flaws. And there were times when the plot just kind of felt like it was meandering around. Like, there were times when they just sort of wander into this place and there wasn't even really like a proper transition into it. It was a bit of a mess. But I'm glad I stuck with it because the thing that saved it for me was the ending. I won't spoil it, but what happens at the ending actually brings all of it together and it actually does start to make sense. It saves what I thought was a mess of a movie. And for that, I'm actually glad I watched it. Okay, next we got Resurrection. I've seen quite a few horror movies this season. Weird. Anyway, this one's kind of the opposite of Perlimps. I was enjoying it up until the ending. Here's what it's about. It's about a successful businesswoman whose ex-boyfriend comes back and he starts messing with her life. So she has to figure out ways of fighting back against him, which is easier said than done since this guy is a master manipulator. Overall, I actually did think that this was an extremely well done psychological horror movie. It had good acting, creative camera work, and was very well written. Like, wow, it's a horror movie where I actually care about the characters and I care about what's going on. The leading lady of this picture is well composed, stoic, and has complete and utter confidence in herself. But then this evil man comes along and brings the ugliness of her past back to her. And it makes the armor that she's built up for herself begin to crack. As it goes on, you learn more and more about these two, and it does a good job of building and building up the tension up until the ending. I won't spoil it, but I just didn't like the ending. It ends on kind of this ambiguous note, but it was too obvious. And the more I think about it, the less necessary it seems. It's one of those endings where it wants you to think about it, but the more I think about it, the less I like it. Perhaps somebody can make sense of it, or figure out what the deeper meaning of it was, but for me, it just didn't work. And now for our final film, we have Where is Anne Frank? This one I actually really liked. I thought it had flaws for sure, but ultimately a good movie. Though before I begin, I have to say I looked up the director's filmography and realized that I've actually seen one of his previous movies. It was a movie called The Congress, which I'm just going to say is one of the trippiest movies I have ever seen in my life. In fact, I think I even reviewed it on my channel years ago. Wow, talk about coming around full circle. But now for this movie. It is an animated, fictionalized retelling of the story of Anne Frank. And if you know the real life story, then you know how much of a tragedy her life was. In fact, as I was watching this movie, I had a pit in my stomach because of what was eventually going to happen. The main character is Anne Frank's imaginary friend Kitty, and the plot is about her coming to life from the pages of Anne's diary. And as the movie goes on, Kitty is using the diary to look into the past and hopefully find out what happened to her friend. As the movie goes on, it bounces back from the present to the past. And while in the past, you see how Anne used her imagination to escape her reality, and how Kitty helped her out during those dark times. The movie does a good job of creating this friendship between the two of them, even though one of them isn't even real. They don't just talk to each other, they actually have discussions and even the occasional arguments. I thought that was really clever because it shows you how strong Frank's imagination was. Even though Kitty wasn't real, Frank still treated her like a real person. It created this believable sense of friendship between the two of them, and you actually do care about both of them. This was a wonderfully humanized movie. But I did think there were two big flaws with the movie. They don't ruin the movie, but they do stand out. The first one being the logic. When Kitty comes to life, at first she's a ghost haunting the Anne Frank exhibit. Nobody can see her and she can't touch anybody or anything. That part I'm actually okay with. But then later she actually does come to life. She starts walking around the real world, people can see and talk with her, and she can actually touch and interact with things. It's like, what? And no, there's no proper explanation for it, it just sort of happens. The other problem, though this is a small one, is that there's kind of this romance between Kitty and this boy in the present day. It felt a little bit forced, and ultimately, it was pretty unnecessary. Other than that, though, I thought this movie was actually pretty good. If you're up for an emotional experience, or possibly even something that'll make you cry, then I think you'll like this movie. Check it out. And that's all the movies I saw for this year at the International Film Festival. Some good ones, some okay ones, all of them are pretty interesting. I hope you enjoyed my reviews of them, and for now, see ya.